Let's see.
Ready?
First, I wouldn't be there. Yes.
This meeting is called to order. This is Tuesday, December 6th meeting of the Shrewsbury Select Board. We'll get right into the agenda. We'll start with approving the bills, payrolls, and warrants.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Next order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the November 8th and November 15th meetings.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. And we have a few announcements this evening. The first one is, board is going to be having a public forum on the ARPA funds that we received from the federal government. The board has come up with a list of proposed projects that we are going to be bringing forward. And we're going to have a forum on that at 6:30 on December 13th at the Shrewsbury Senior Center at 98 Maple Ave to discuss the funding plans for the second phase of the ARPA funds. This will be an opportunity for the residents, the select board, and town staff to meet in a casual setting to discuss and get feedback on the Phase 2 ARPA funding plan. Stay tuned for a link to the funding plan. Please contact the Office of the Town Manager at 508-841-8508 or through email at manager@shrewsburyma.gov with any questions. This is not going to just be a meeting where everybody sits in the hall and we're going to tell you what we're doing. We're going to have a presentation on what we're proposing to do, and then we'll break out into sessions covering each one of the major topics, and you can ask questions, give input, etc. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. The next announcement is we created a tax relief fund committee. As a result of the articles we passed at town meeting to give tax relief to seniors and other people who qualify. So we're seeking 3 individuals to serve on the new tax relief fund committee that was established at the May 2022 annual town meeting, which is tasked with easing the burden on those members in our community who may be least able to absorb the costs associated with the rising tax burden. The deadline to apply is December 13th, 2022 at 4:30 p.m. Resumes and letters of interest can be sent by mail to the office of the Select Board at 100 Maple Ave or by email to selectboard@shrewsburyma.gov. For more information, visit something, because I lost it. If you need more information, call the office of the Select Board. This is not to apply for the funding. This is to apply to be on the board. Excuse me, on the board,
Do you want me to read it? I have it in
on
front
the
of me.
board and committee vacancy page.
Would you like me to read the website? I have it in front of me.
Excuse me, I'm having a tough time tonight.
I have the website in front of me if you'd like me to read the address.
Sure.
Sure. So it's https://shrewsburyma.gov/12255/board-and-committee-vacancies.
Right, and if you want to do it the easy way, call the Select Board's office. Okay, and the last announcement is a reminder that the Shrewsbury Police Department's annual toy drive is this Saturday, December 10th, from 9 a.m. to noon at the old police station at 106 Maple Ave. They're accepting new unwrapped toys, gift cards, new youth and teen clothing, paper products, personal care, and laundry items. If you can't make it Saturday, there's a large donation box in the lobby of the police department to drop off your toy drive donations all week, any time of the day. Thank you in advance for all of the support for our community and helping Shrewsbury families and children have a happy holiday season. It's a great event. It's usually very, very successful, so we'd appreciate if you can help out with that. Okay, we have one more thing. It's not an announcement, but a report. It shows some pictures of the progress of the police station, so if Taylor could bring that up. Okay, we're gonna go through these quickly. I hope. We have it? Okay, so, first picture is, this is obviously the front entry. The emblem for the police department is, has been poured and formed in the terrazzo floor at the front entry. Obviously, this, the walls aren't finished yet, but to give you an idea what it's gonna look like. Next, please. This room is the roll call room where the officers will start their shifts each shift period. That room is finished. This room is, next please, is the report preparation room. This is where the officers will get to write their reports. Just as a way of comparison, the officers currently have 2 desks for all the officers to write their reports. So this will be quite a change for them. Next. This picture I took because it's an office for the clinical support staff. It's a new program that the chief has instituted. We have a clinical social worker who actually now is riding on a shift with one of the police officers to help deal with social issues, people having particularly mental health problems, and it's going to be hopefully an ongoing program and maybe be grown over the years, but it's a good program, and it shows that the police department is looking forward and trying to use new approaches to policing that we haven't seen in town before. Next. This is the patrol room. This is where the officers are going to have desks and work. Sergeants will be in here also. This is one section of the men's locker room on the first floor for the patrolmen. There's a female locker room also. This is the fitness room. This is in the back of the building facing the woods towards St. John's. This is the male cell room. This picture doesn't do it justice. It's technologically quite advanced. There are 6 male cells. There are several female cells. There's a handicap cell. There's a juvenile cell. There's 8 or 9 cells altogether in there. Next. This is just a picture of what a cell will look like. This is an evidence receiving room. When a detainee is brought in, if there's any evidence, the officer will put the evidence in one of those lockers. There's a key. The evidence gets put in the locker. The key gets dropped in the locker, and then nobody can access it any longer except for the officer who's in charge of the evidence from a room on the other side of that wall. This is the evidence storage room, quite different from the one that's in the existing station. Next. This is the armory weapons storage area. Metal cages all locked up. They can be locked up. Next. This is the dispatch area. The dispatch consoles aren't in yet. They're due in about, I think, the next 2 weeks. This is just a stairway to, you can see this stairway from Maple Ave. This is the clerk's area. This is the front of the building facing towards the town hall and the existing police station. This is the clerk's record storage area. This again is, this is a current picture of the work that's being done in the lobby. Although it doesn't look like it's almost finished, it is. It'll probably be finished by the end of next week. This is the presentation room. This is a theater-style presentation room similar to what's at the high school. It's not quite as big. There are, if you can see at the top, there's some, in the middle of the picture, there's some metal frames. TVs will drop down in there for when they're making presentations, so people towards the back of the room can see the presentations better. They're working on prepping the wall for wood finishes on the on that wall in the back. the room is made so that there's tiered seating, and there's a big space at the bottom, so there can be meetings in the bottom on a level floor, and that is going to be available to groups other than just the police department. Next. This is a plaza outside the presentation room for breakout sessions. Next. This is the kitchen area for the break room. That's on the second floor. This is the administration area for the Superior office area on the second floor. This is the conference room in the Superior office area. This is next to the chief's office. All the Superior offices will use this area. This is the detectives area. This area, if you go back for a second, this area is right below where the cupola is. It looks quite impressive, but it's just a big room with a few walls, believe it or not. But the light coming from that room is really, from that cupola is really impressive. And this is, I believe, the last picture. This is the detectives' evidence storage area. So I believe that's it, right? So just a quick overview of what's happening in the police station. It's supposed to be substantially complete by the end of December, and I think they're planning on moving in March. Is that right?
Yeah, fully open.
Excuse me?
Fully open.
Fully open.
Yep.
So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to take some more pictures. You'll get to see it when it's finished, when they start bringing furniture in. But it's coming along nicely. It's quite a change from the other station. So anyways, just thought people might like to see what's happening there. Okay, so next is the town manager's report. And Mr. Mizukai, you said you don't have anything this evening?
Well, I just have that one
Just one item?
update. The town of Shrewsbury was incorporated officially on December 15th, 1727, which means in a little over a week's time, the town will turn 295 years old. That's a week from this coming Thursday. So I just wanted to note that it's obviously a big birthday year for the town, and that also means that as we move to the annual town meeting this spring, we'll be establishing a fund towards contributions and development of a 300th year celebration. So we're excited to be able to do that, and just wanted to note the town's birthday will occur, at least the incorporation part of it, before the board meets again.
Good.
So that's my town manager's report.
Don't even think it, Mr. Samia. Okay, thank you. We're going to skip down to item 7 and hold item 6 until after item 7 and 8. We have the school committee here with us this evening for a joint meeting to review the FY 2024 financial forecast with regards to the May 2021 override framework. And so we'll get going. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yep.
What's that?
So you ready for me to go?
Would you like to introduce the?
Sure. Lovely to be with you all. Good evening. I'm Lindsay Heffernan, the chair of the school committee. Why don't I let my colleagues introduce themselves to the right, and we'll go around. Go ahead, please.
Jason Palich, Vice Chairperson.
Sandy Fritz.
John Wensky, Secretary.
Welcome.
Erin Boucher.
And I will note, Mr. Collins is with us as well this evening. Dr. Sawyer did have an unforeseen family matter that he could not be with us this evening and sends his regrets. Thank you for having us.
Great. Would you like me to go?
Yes, would you please?
Great, thank you. Good evening, members of the school committee, select board members. It's my plan this evening, in reflection back to the documents established for the May 2021 override, to bring you all up to speed in this joint session regarding the most recent financial forecast, starting with fiscal year 24 and projecting out through fiscal year 28 as best that we can. my goal this evening is to be able to really provide a comparison from where we thought we'd be in that initial deliberation that we had in the winter and spring of 2021, and where we believe we are right now, and how we'll begin the FY24 budget process. So we'll walk through that forecast. We'll take a look at the exact balance of the override stabilization fund. There's some quote-unquote required calculations that are in the agreement between the select board and school committee that we'll work through as a matter of procedure, and then hopefully open it up for discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions and understand where the two boards would like to go. So Taylor, you can move forward, please. So I know this is always a challenge to see, but it's really important that we put everything on the screen, I think, at one time for us to work through. So as it says at the top of the screen there, I won't spend a lot of time, but this is the financials that we all were projecting and agreeing to on March 16th of 2021, which is an evening that we held a joint meeting between these two bodies, and ultimately the board moved forward with calling for a ballot question for the override on the May ballot. So we had projected a full 4-year duration for the override, which would utilize an override stabilization fund, where we'd place money into the override stabilization fund for the first 2 consecutive years, draw down upon those funds in the subsequent 2 years, taking us through the end of fiscal year 25, and beginning to show a deficit for fiscal year 26. So that's where we started. And Taylor, if you can go forward, we'll jump to where we are. Even harder to review, and I do apologize for that. The bottom line that I think is important to touch on here, I've run 2 forecasts to compare back to the 2021 forecast. This one that's shown on the screen is what we are calling the base level. There's 2 levels that we can appropriate between or think about when we look at maximum expenditures on both the municipal line items and school line items. That's a 3.5% increase year over year on the municipal line items, and a 4% increase on the educational line items. And in this model, the 2 blue lines, the one at the top would indicate funds coming out of override stabilization, and the blue line at the bottom indicates funds going in. So on our original projection, between the first 2 years, we were placing about $4.5 million into override stabilization, and none in fiscal year 24. Actually, we were drawing down. In this model, FY24 shows the ability to contribute up to almost $1.8 million additional dollars into the override stabilization fund, being completely neutral, not using any override stabilization funds in fiscal year 25. And then in fiscal year 26 and 27, utilizing override stabilization funds, but still having a balanced budget. So at this base level, 3.5% and 4% increases year over year from FY 23 to 24 and then through 27, we're showing a full 6-year duration of this override. So Taylor, if you can go to the next slide. In this model, which is having expenditures at the higher level, you can see that even at the higher spending levels, we're still contributing funds in fiscal year 24 into the override stabilization fund. However, we would begin drawing out of that fund in fiscal year 25, and we begin to show a deficit 1 year earlier than the previous model of about $3.4 million within fiscal year 2027, despite using the override stabilization fund. So a couple takeaways from these 2 slides is, we're using the same revenue model under both slides, still very conservative, which we have always been in our revenue models. We've progressed significantly as far as stronger financial conditions and more tax levy, which I'll get into here in a second, from where we thought we would be. So again, main takeaways, there is something to note when we're spending at different levels, obviously, especially if that compounds year over year. But all in all, in both scenarios, we're contributing more to the override stabilization fund and have a longer duration than we originally anticipated in March of 2021. So let's talk a little bit more about those specific differences that we can see from the latest forecast. So as I said, in March of 2021, we projected a 4-year duration of the override based upon the knowledge that we had then. If we look at that base scenario of spending at the lower levels, it projects a 6-year duration. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, if we were to spend at the highest thresholds permitted under the agreement, it shows a 5-year duration. Again, it's using the same revenue models year over year. So obviously, if you spend more money and don't anticipate more revenue, you're going to have a shorter duration. Year over year in the first 3 consecutive fiscal cycles, we have received more revenues than we had anticipated, given our very conservative approach that we've taken. I wanted to look at the fiscal year 24 base tax levy as it compared to what we anticipated in March of 2021. And obviously, as I noted, we're using the same tax levy regardless of the spending scenario. So those two numbers in the current base and the current maximum are the same. But the notable figure here is that the base tax levy is $960,750 greater than we anticipated it in March of 2021. That has a compounding effect because of Proposition 2.5. It also shows strong tax base growth, new growth that has occurred within the community from investment that we weren't anticipating, despite factoring in new growth in our forecasts each and every year of nearly $1 million. So incredible tax base growth. This is not impacted by property values of existing properties. This is all new development within the community that's been experienced that we didn't anticipate. With regards to the override stabilization fund, as we ended fiscal year 2023, which will wrap up in June, and we did our calculations for the start of fiscal year 24. We had originally projected an override stabilization balance of about $4.8 million. Within the 2 scenarios that were run on the previous slide, we now anticipate the balance of the override stabilization fund to be about 7.9 or $7.3 million, depending on how the budget plays out that we'll work on over the next few months. So really a much stronger position with regards to the override stabilization fund than we thought. And the final area of comparison that is interesting is kind of what we originally projected the net position to be in fiscal year 27 in that original forecast versus how it looks in the 2 scenarios. So we're really driving out the duration of this override regardless of the model that we look at. We originally thought that fiscal year 27 would be about a $6.6 million deficit in the original forecast. Our most updated numbers in the worst case scenario appears that it would be a deficit maximum of $3.5 million. So we're really working that we've almost cut that in half, even at the highest spending scenario, which again shows the improved strength of the conditions that we're at, and just puts us in a much more favorable condition. So really, In some ways, if you could look at this, if you kind of give it another 2 years, right, based upon the strength that we've seen over the last 2 years, it even seems like the maximum spending scenario could still result in a balanced budget for fiscal year 27. So that's definitely conceivable given the net change in position from where we thought we were almost 2 years ago at this time. One more slide to go through here, and that is what I'm calling the required calculations that are drawn out whenever we identify additional funds over what we had projected in March of 2021. So I'm projecting a little over $2 million in additional revenue than what we thought we would have for fiscal year 24 in our original forecast. We're required through the agreement between these two bodies that we've set up a formula. And when the agreements were signed, the first 25% is to be deposited into the general stabilization fund, which we will do. 10% of the total dollar amount would go into the override stabilization fund, which we intend to do. So that then leaves a balance of $1.3 million. Further, up to 60%, subject to the maximum cap, is to be dedicated toward educational purposes and 40% towards municipal. So using those two numbers at the bottom of the screen there, I did the calculation to say even if we spent at the highest level that we're allowed under the commitments, is there a sufficient amount of funds available to spend at both the education and municipal sides of the budget? And since there is a balance in that far right-hand side column at the bottom of the screen, I am confirming that there are sufficient funds to spend at the higher level. Now, spending at the higher level, even though we have the funds, is not something that I think we would walk blindly into. I think it's these two bodies have always agreed that that would be a commitment based on needs, strategies, and meeting the overall goals that you both have before you. I will also interject, and I'm sure Mr. Collins will agree that, and you'll all agree that inflation is going to play a major hand in the fiscal year 24 budget cycle. Maybe something that maybe none of us have ever experienced even in our careers on a year-over-year basis. So there is available funds. I am concerned about the impact of inflation. And I think inflation will, on the municipal side at least, mean that we'll barely be treading water. You know, we're not even at the higher level. We wouldn't be taking on a lot of new initiatives or staff because of the challenges that we'll face in utility costs, fuel costs, general services over what they are even in the current budget. So in summary, we're in a much stronger financial position than we projected to be. We're still using conservative out-year revenue projections, which I believe we can achieve and do better as we work through those fiscal years. And with regards to fiscal year 24, there is sufficient revenues available to spend at the maximum levels if we choose to do that. And I think it's going to be nearly a requirement to maintain service levels on the municipal side to do that. So happy to engage in the conversation or answer any questions. Turn it back over to you.
Ms. Heffernan, do you
Yeah.
have any comments?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Mizikar. A couple of things. When I think back to 21 months ago when we were all here, while we're all very concerned about inflation, we certainly are in quite a different position to today. And I think there is evidenced in those slides an awful lot of smart planning, a lot of numbers. But for those who are following across the line, I hope that a lot of the residents are really proud of us following through on the commitments that we have made and sticking to our agreements and frankly doing what we know families have to do. When you have extra funds, you tuck them away, and 35% every year putting those away so that we have them is really smart, and we are certainly in a positive position when I think about the school budget, and I certainly welcome Mr. Collins and my colleagues adding in here, a couple of things just for you all to know and for the public who are watching. Certainly, we're in a place of much greater financial stability, and planning for the schools post-override is a wildly different exercise, and we are continue to be very appreciative of that. In terms of next fiscal year, we have settled contracts with all of our 4 bargaining agreements, and so we are in a position where we have a lot of certainty. Staff is the largest portion of our budget, so we have a lot of certainty in that, and certainly in that line item of sort of known expenses. I will note that one of our most volatile line items is most definitely going to hit some inflationary pressures, in particular that it's out-of-district tuitions, which is the state sets a maximum amount by which, and you can correct me if I get this wrong, or any of my departments wrong, sets a maximum amount by which any out-of-district placement for kiddos in our town that need particular special education services, by which those schools can raise their tuition costs. That cap has been set this year at the request of those schools at 14%. That's not a number that many of us in our budgets are things that we're used to, and so a 14% growth in an item that is already subject to a lot of variability is certainly something that we are paying a lot of attention to. It's a little early for us to know exactly what that's going to look like, but something important for the community to know when we think about what does inflation look like. 14% in one line item is a big number for us. So. Well, we have, as a committee, approved at this point in time our budget guidelines of what's most important to us, and that's a public document anyone can take a look at, and a timeline to match up with what you all are doing and your process. We're certainly still very early. We'll be doing some of our first budget workshops in the coming weeks as we try to take this information and then figure out what's important. Once we're kind of done with this, I do want to make sure you all know we're also in the process of doing a lot of planning, because now we're looking out a bunch of years and saying, okay, now what, and what are some of the things, I think particularly coming post-COVID, that people want to see from their schools. And I think parents, and maybe all of America, has a different understanding of what schools do and what they're looking for, and also what gaps are there and what work do we need to do around remediation. So very much appreciate your having us here this evening to make sure we're all on the same page and the public understands, because this is obviously still an important topic of conversation for everybody, and what their overall tax rate is matters. But I think the schools are doing our best to make sure that we're spending in the places that we need to, and we'll be engaging in work this year to kind of hear more voices and make sure we're meeting the needs of our residents.
Mr. Samia, you must have a question. No? Anyone else have any comments?
Well, actually, I do have a
Mr.
question.
Frick?
He's got
I
some.
do have a question.
Yes?
So could we talk about the out-of-district tuition, understanding volatility? So it'd create a potential crunch for the first year, and then the second year will depend on how it's going to run through on the circuit breaker reimbursement, and if everyone has the same issues with 14%, we don't know if the denominator will be big enough going forward. Have there been anything from the legislative side to create either a one-time relief to communities? Is there anything on that? Because we're not unique in this area. And volatility is not unique, but it is the biggest number that we've seen. We'd see one-offs before, but not in the aggregate. So any discussions on that, or is there any buzz? Are we hearing anything on that?
Go ahead. You have
Sure,
something to say
yeah,
there?
I would just add that, there's been a groundswell of activity, certainly amongst the various professional associations, from the Mass Association of Schools, School Committees, the Mass Association of School Superintendents, to the Mass Association of School Business Officials. I mean, you name it. There's been a groundswell of activity, because the typical, annual incremental increase in those tuitions, would usually range literally between 0 and 3%, more normally in the 2 to 2.25% range. So it's certainly out of the norm, and there's been plenty of efforts to communicate, to have school superintendents and school committees communicate to their local state representatives and senators, and also between those associations and directly with the commissioner's office. But frankly, the office that sets this rate, the Operational Services Division, has set the rate, and so there is a bit of concern about it being kind of fait accompli at this point. So we're not really sure how it's going to play out,
Yeah.
but certainly there's been a lot of activity to have people reconsider that 14% increase.
Thank you. One other question?
Sure.
Just transportation contract?
Yep, that's the other, it's our largest single contract that we issue to a vendor, and that will be put out to bid likely this coming January.
Okay.
That would take place for a fall start.
Are there a lot of players out there besides AA, or is it?
There are not. That's it's a nationwide phenomenon. There's very few players because there's big barriers to entry with all the upfront capital costs. So there are not a lot of players. But we're going to obviously engage those that are in the Massachusetts marketplace proactively and send them our bid specifications. We'll have a pre-bid meeting, invite them to Shrewsbury to bid on the contract. And at the same time, I have to say that we are pleased with our current vendor, certainly in their performance for the past 4 years and through the COVID years.
Thank you. So the good news is we have 85% relatively settled contractually, but the other two budget busters that we've had over the years, that's up in the air. So we're going to,
That's
okay.
a
All right.
fair assessment.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Collins, what's the big driver on the bus contract? Is the fuel, or is it the personnel?
It's all the same inflationary pressures that we all experience, so it's fuel, it's insurance, it's the labor costs. And I know just in conversations with the ownership at AA Transportation that the ownership tries to, certainly provide competitive and fair wages and benefits to all their employees. We've been the beneficiary of that with not experiencing big bus driver shortages. At the outset of this school year, for effectively, 48 committed bus vehicles, I think that we're looking for 2 drivers, and they were able to solve that problem pretty quickly. So, they're cognizant of the marketplace, but those are all the same driving forces in order to remain competitive that will be implicitly, factored into any subsequent bid.
Is that contract strictly a bid contract, or is it, can you negotiate that?
No, it is a strictly bid process, Chapter 30B. We put out bid specifications, vendors that meet those minimum qualifications is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Frick, did you have a question?
Just, I think it bears repeating the collaboration with our boards because I think we would be in a much different position if, first, we didn't have the override, but the creation of the stabilization fund, looking at some of these drivers, including inflation, which we didn't anticipate to be at the levels they are now. And we're in a solid position for us to plan, for the community to plan. So I think it's the outcome we wanted from all of the work that we did. So thank you for that.
I have a question.
Ms. Cassavet?
This is for Mr. Collins. On a typical year, what would be the increase that you would expect from an out-of-district special education placement?
I'd say 2 to 2.5%. And that those were, again, the process, it's a pretty standard road process where usually in the month of October, early November, the Massachusetts Operational Services Division, which is a state agency and has the authority to set that rate for all the private school providers, would issue that letter to all school districts, and it's a uniform increase that's allowable for all of those private schools to increase their tuition amount up by that percentage. And it was usually 2.5% range. So 14% is certainly way out of the norm.
Unheard of, yeah. Could I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
So was there a rationale given as to why such an increase
Sure.
would be?
Yeah, the rationale is kind of the same milieu that we've all been talking about, is inflation, and that, the private schools, I think, I don't know this for sure, but, one can assume that there was, a case made that they were experiencing labor wage pressures as well and having a difficult time getting employees. and retaining employees. You know, the private school providers, of course, you know, they're not easy environments to work in. They're pretty intensive with students with pretty significant special needs. So I think that they effectively, you know, made a case that they needed to provide more financial incentives to attract and retain employees in their organizations. And that was really, we've asked for and received some supplementary rationale for that big jump, and that's really the primary driver.
Thank you.
If I can just add one item on that, I think it's, we are putting, now that that sort of is a settled number, it was a number that was out there for a little while, but now that it is settled, we will be taking it up on one of our future agenda items to reach out to our delegation to make clear what this means for us. And obviously, what it means for us is what it means for all of you as well, right? That we're in this together. If it makes sense that be a jointly written letter, certainly that's something we can discuss, but I think, you know, while they need to hear from the professional associations, it's the municipalities that are bearing the cost of the increase. And so something that we will, hopefully at our next meeting, be taking up to just make sure that we're letting everybody know that this has a huge impact. And frankly, both, while, you know, DESE is sort of responsible for setting the rate, I, like you, Mr. Sammy, I'm concerned while there's some murmurings in the State House of doing something, that those might be one time, and then those rates are with us, right? Then next year, when they want 2% on top, that 14 is sort of baked in, and then what? So certainly something we'll be paying a lot of attention to.
Yes, Ms. Conlon?
In regards to the out-of-district placement tuitions, do those school providers ever not increase to the fully allowed amount?
No,
So we can anticipate the full 14%.
correct.
Thank you.
I think that the modulating factor is just the number of students we sent,
Yeah.
right? That is where, as we move through the school year, we'll know a little bit more. Obviously, the move-ins, the move-outs, all of that, but sort of, you know, where we are. So we'll be adding more detail to that as we move into the spring.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
I'm assuming, you know, I understand typically students that are out of district have really intensive needs. I'm assuming there's exploration of the cost with placing students out of district versus hiring the staff needed to support them to the extent that they're getting in these out-of-district placements.
In terms of potentially keeping them in district? and
Keeping them
provide-
in district and hiring staff to support their needs.
Oh, sure. You know, you know, our special ed department, our special ed team, you know, the whole primary driver, you know, in terms of dealing with any individual student and their educational plan is to try to keep the student in the least restrictive environment, in district, and provide the supports necessary. And in those cases where it's just not really suitable for the intensity of the need, then it's really, you know, placing a student out of Shrewsbury is kind of the last resort, if you will. And so, you know, the numbers fluctuate, but, you know, again, you know, rounding the numbers, we have approximately 60 students in special education placements on, you know, a base of 6,000 students, so it's a very small percentage that are actually, on a percentage basis, going there. But certainly, you know, when a student gets placed, those dollar amounts can vary widely, you know, from even just on the low end, you know, an $85,000 a year placement plus transportation to, you know, upwards of $375,000 per year per student. So that kind of speaks to the intensity of the need, and really that we would not be capable either from a staffing expertise level or from our facility standpoint, or a combination of those things.
Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit more for you. So when we think about kids for whom potentially we could provide services in district, and what would that look like? I mean, there's some categories which I think across the board, public schools just aren't designed for, right? Kids who need residential and around-the-clock care, kids with really acute health issues in addition to educational issues where they're getting medical services that really we're just not equipped to offer. But when the opportunity presents itself to think about certain segments of young people, I think I want the community to know that we are proactively looking at those things. And one example is we are required to provide educational services to young people well after the traditional high school age is up to the age of 22, and currently many of those often life skills and some other things to make sure that they are able to transition to being independent adults. Right now, the program that we use most often for those young people is in Marlboro, run through one of our collaboratives, and we are actively now trying to figure out how to provide those services back in our own community. And there's lots of talk about potentially some exciting programming that would happen in the town center. We're very thrilled. There's business plans and lots of work happening to kind of make that happen, but that is an example of that's a population that we thought we can do that, we can figure that out, we can do. It's been work, there's been planning grants, there's been state dollars to support it, so it's not a light lift, but to say there's a population of young people that we think we can provide services to, and most importantly for us, provide them here, right? And have I want them in Shrewsbury, I want them walking around, I want them taking the bus here, I want them going to the public library, like all those connections that we hope that they develop. But it was also an opportunity that our district really looked at and said that's sort of when you look at all of these kids, there's some that we think we can handle and we can build the proper programming to support them. Whereas some of these other, a kid with really complex medical issues, we're never going to be able to do that, and that number is not going to vary, but for whether they live here or don't live here. If I can just add one more thing that you've probably been hearing a lot about, which has people might be wondering if it has the potential to impact our budget, and that is around school start time. It has a transportation impact, so just wanted to kind of share a little bit of our thinking there. Next week, we have a advisory committee of parents and educators and community experts, and just an incredible group of people helping think through this very complex issue about how do you get 6,000 kids to school within a relatively short window and get them all home at the relatively same amount of time. And one of the things that we are thinking of, and transportation is the answer of like how do you move them. In our planning, and Mr. Collins and I sit on the logistics committees, we spent a lot of meetings talking about this particular issue. We are trying to plan for that without an impact to our budget. There are ways that has what has fouled up a lot of communities. They can't figure out how do you make changes without having a major budgetary impact. And so we are trying to go into this saying, but for the fact that a new contract will go out and it'll have built-in inflation in it, and we sort of know that's coming, we are not looking for any particular changes. And so what that really means for the community is there will still be 3 routes of buses that go through the town that drop off kids at 3 different levels of schools in the morning and in the afternoon, and we're trying to stay within that. The other option would be the budget gets significantly expanded to kind of do 2 sets of drop-offs and move everyone later. We're not moving in that direction. We've explored it. We've talked about it. It's just not worth what would cost us on the personnel side, frankly, to make that. But there will be more chatter about that in the community, so you might as well hear it from us first, that we are thinking it through and trying to do what's best for kids' mental health and their sleep needs and the after-school activities and the logistics and the daycare and the staffing. So more to come. Stay tuned.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? No? Mr. Vizica, next steps?
Well, we'll be moving into the budget process, and we'll continue to have regular meetings with Mr. Collins and Dr. Sawyer about the progress on both sides. And we have the budget laid out that we'll bring on the municipal side back to the select board in late January. So we just move into our traditional budget development cycle at this point.
Okay. You have?
Yeah, if I could just really quickly, because you have a somewhat different audience that pays attention to your meetings than pays attention to our meetings, but a few slides, I promise I will move quickly. It's important. You've been doing strategic planning, and we've been doing strategic planning, and now that we're looking at 5-year forecasts and where are we going to be, we're asking important questions about what are we trying to do. If you don't mind, Taylor, moving ahead. We have a wonderful mission. We're not trying to change our mission of what we do in the Shrewsbury Public Schools, right? In partnership with the community, provide students with the skills and knowledge for the 21st century, and appreciation of our democratic tradition, and the desire to continue and learn through life. If you don't mind going ahead for me, Taylor. Our core values, these are sort of our core identity statements. Those are also, we don't envision particularly changing. We may edit or tweak them, but we still think these are very important for what do our young people need to get out of the district. Respect, responsibility, collaboration and communication, commitment to high standards and expectations, and certainly equity. Our broader vision, I hope some of you were involved, many in the community were involved, setting our portrait of the graduate. That is our statement of what are we here to do? And we're here to develop graduates on a whole bunch of range areas. I won't read them out loud to you, and there's much more that people can find online. But we are going back, looking at each one of these and making sure, are these still the right ones? Do they need some edits? Do they need some tweaks along the way? And good work, I hope, to come over the next couple of months. If you don't mind going forward one more. Our strategic priorities were last set in 2017, and they ran from 2018 to 2022, and so we're nearing the end of that process. So we're now thinking 2023 to 2027, what do we want our goals to be? This is where I imagine we're going to see some changes happening, right? And we're going to be looking and asking, are these the right questions? Obviously, these were set pre-COVID. We're in a different place. There's one in here about, technology and what we're doing about technology. Now that we've gone through COVID and everyone has an iPad, people are saying too much technology, go the other direction. So good conversations for us to have with the community about what is next. Really what I want you all to know is we are beginning a process to start to engage the community. And so I want people, when they hear about this, to know we want to hear from you. We want to know. We've put it in our school journal that just hit people's homes in the community. I think it goes to every resident in the town last week, telling them what we're up to and that we're looking for their support. And if we can go forward one more slide, some of the work that we have been up to, we did a thought exchange at the beginning of the school year that is, if Dr. Sawyer were here, he'd explain it better. It's much better than a survey. It sort of surveys and ranks in one what comments people are, what we're seeing, to understand what people's perceptions were about the schools, what was going well. It's sort of in many ways, our first year back after COVID in sort of a semi-normal year, and there was a lot of questions to ask about how are the kids doing. We've also engaged, every school has a school council that involves parents, staff, and community members, and used that forum along with leadership team meetings and district leadership meetings to kind of workshop what was important here, again, from those earlier statements I showed. We as a committee did engage a planning consultant called Focused Schools. They've done a lot of work in a lot of different Massachusetts schools. We were able to talk to superintendents in those schools and make sure that they had a good experience with them. We like them, they're engaging, they make for a fun meeting. If you're ever deciding to come to one, come. And we held a first public forum with stakeholders before the Thanksgiving holidays. They have also done individual calls with all of us to make sure they understand what's important to us. So what I want people to know are upcoming. 2 slides, and then I promise I'll stop. There will be lots more workshops, both with us, with the leadership team, certainly through the holidays. Things get a little quiet, but the district and staff are going to be working on this. We're most importantly in January and February looking to do this says focus group conversations. That could entail a lot of different ways to get feedback from people, from students, staff, and families. And in particular, we're wanting to make sure that we reach families that we don't always hear from, right? And that's important to us. We're thinking about what languages, what places, what spaces can we be in, and can we meet people. Had a conversation about at the high school using our advisory period to talk to students and make sure we're hearing students' voices. And so we're trying to be thoughtful, and we're open to ideas that people have about how to make sure we're hearing from people. And then of course, we're reviewing data, right? The data, what we hear from people is one source of data, but there's an awful lot of demographic data, about testing data, about where we've come from, where we're going, and that is some work that we are happy to have some outside expertise to refine this. Our hope is that this isn't going to match up perfectly with budgeting, but that's okay. We're working it through. That we will have some draft priorities, goals, and metrics, which I think is an added piece for us as a committee. I know it was important to all of us that we had ways to measure success, and that was an important added piece that we wanted to make sure we had in there. Our aim is for March, and that we would be then reviewing that in workshops with the school committee, bringing it to the public, certainly having some opportunities for stakeholder feedback, as you similarly have done, right? We want to hear from people and know where we're right and where we're wrong, with the goal to adopt those next year goals in the month of April, certainly in advance of town meeting and in advance of a finalizing of our budget, even if we don't have it for the first round of the budget. So I think what I would just say is that if you don't mind going forward, there is a website. I won't try to read that out loud. We'll make sure you can share these materials where people can give feedback to Focus Schools. They already have up a sort of a quick one-pager about what did they hear the first night they did some planning. And they're trying to make it easy and digestible and let you come in, share what you need, and then go. You don't need to do a lot of homework. So I would welcome all of you, of course, here, but even most importantly, those who are listening and those who are paying attention to engage with us and tell us what your needs are for the next 5 years and what you think we should be working on, because there's a lot of opportunities for us at this moment in time. So I want to take the opportunity to make sure you all knew, and certainly I'm happy to answer any questions, and mostly I'm looking for you to retweet and Facebook us and help us get people to these various events. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't know if anyone else is from, we really appreciate being here.
We've got a lot of work to do in a couple of months.
We do. That's okay. We're good.
Keep you busy, that's for sure.
That it will.
Thank you for
All right.
coming in.
Thank
and
you.
We're probably going to see you in a couple of months anyways with the other study, right?
Yes, we will. We look forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Okay, so are we gonna bring,
What's that?
we're gonna bring the,
Yep, do
you wanna do? the-
number 8. Yep,
Okay, are you bringing them on, or is,
Taylor's bringing them on.
okay, so the next order of business is to have a presentation from the Institute of Human-Centered Design on the town of Shrewsbury's ADA self-evaluation and transportation plan. So why don't we just get started? So, good evening. We do have somebody on the other end, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Dave West. I'm one of the folks joining from the Institute for Human-Centered Design. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, that's a
good
start.
evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Would you like to,
Why see two of my images?
Yeah, we're showing up more than once.
Yeah.
I guess let's see. I'm going to say present my entire screen. I hope that's the right thing to do. And there we go. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
we can
No.
see you.
Oh, no? Okay, I've done the wrong thing then. Give me just a moment. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Just, I'm attempting to click on a button that says share. It says share your entire screen.
Yep.
And I'm clicking on share. I'm not sure why it's not happening. Oh, here we go.
There
All
you
right,
go.
that's something. How about now?
Here you go.
Okay, so that was a little bit rocky, but my name is David West. I'm with the Institute for Human-Centered Design. I've been joined by my colleagues Anna Julian and Kelsey Samuel, and we have a short PowerPoint presentation that we were hoping to present to you. And I suppose whatever works best, either as we go along or once we get to the end, we also could all be available to answer questions. I believe Anna is going to start us off, and Anna, you can just tell me when you want me to advance the slides, and then I'll speak for a bit, and then Kelsey will chat for a bit, and we'll just take care of questions as we have them, I guess.
Okay, David, before you start, just one question. Keith, you were involved in this. Do you want to come up here? Is it easier if we have a discussion if you're at the table, or do you want to stay? I can stay here. I don't know what I can. Okay, well, we'll see what happens at the end of the presentation then. Okay, go ahead, David.
All right, Anna, well, I think you're starting off, and just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
We're ready for you to go.
Anna, I don't hear you. Oh, goodness.
Okay, yes.
Oh, there
Now
we
can I'm sorry, I was on mute. Okay, so next, please. Okay, so as David said, we are from the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and we are here to give you an update on the self-evaluation and transition plan. So our scope of work included the evaluation of programs, services, and activities, which is an infrastructure of policies and procedures that support program access. The scope of work also included a survey for facilities and the ADA self-evaluation, which is a comprehensive data about the current state of compliance that identifies both issues that need corrective action and gaps in policies and procedures. And the scope of work also included a GIS survey of selected streets. Next, please. So the Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that the state and local government entities do not discriminate against people with disabilities in their programs, services, and activities. So the town of Shrewsbury must take steps to examine its programs and establish a plan for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay, so the evaluation of programs, services, and activities, we submitted a report that summarizes our findings of the ADA Title II compliance. The information pertinent to the assessment was obtained from an online ADA questionnaire developed by us, the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and submitted by 16 departments, which is a very good turnout. It shows the town's level of commitment regarding its ADA obligations. And also we received input from the Commission on Disabilities and information from the town website. So our findings, the ADA requires municipalities to designate a responsible employee to coordinate efforts to comply with the ADA. So the town has met its obligations to designate a responsible employee by appointing the town manager as the ADA coordinator. The town also have a grievance procedure. The issue there is that survey responses indicated that some departments are not aware of its existence. And the notice of the ADA requirements, the town has a public notice of non-discrimination. However, survey respondents from some departments are not sure if or where the notice is posted. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Regarding reasonable modifications of policies, practices, and procedures, there is no evidence that the town was unable to provide a reasonable modification when requested. About reasonable accommodation regarding employment, there is no evidence either that the town has failed to provide reasonable accommodations for its employees. In fact, the town does include an equal employment opportunity statement as part of the town's ADA notice, as well as the town job posting. Regarding effective communication, auxiliary aids and services, the town has an obligation to make sure that communication with people with disabilities is as effective as communication with people without disabilities. So within its ADA notice, the town of Shrewsbury states a commitment to provide effective communication through the provision of alternative formats, and also the staff who responded to the questionnaire were aware of their obligation, and they shared some examples of assistance that the departments provide. Next, please. The basis for the self-evaluation, we review buildings and outdoor areas for compliance with the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design and for compliance with 521 CMR of the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. We review for compliance with both and provide recommendations based on the one that provides more accessibility. Next, please. So for each facility that was surveyed, each building and outdoor areas, we submitted a building report, which contains a basic information about the building, including the location of entrances and exits, vertical circulation, and interior layout and functions. It also has the key accessibility issues and order of magnitude cost estimates. And the order of magnitude cost estimates is material only. Next, please. So together with the building report, we submitted a building catalog, which is a database of records of each building element that is not compliant with regards with the ADA or the state code, the 521 CMR. So for each record in the catalog, there is a photograph, a floor and location information element, a list of issues with measurements when appropriate, possible remedies, and cost estimate. Next, please. So 3 strategies to ensure access to programs, services, and activities. One is the relocation of programs, services, and activities within the current facility. So if a program is being offered on a second floor of a building that doesn't have an elevator, the program should be relocated to the accessible level. Or another option is the relocation of programs, services, and activities to another facility if the facility is not accessible. And the last strategy is the renovation of the facility to ensure access to programs, services, and activities when the program cannot be relocated. Next, please. And now, David, I'm going to turn it up to you to go over our findings regarding the buildings, the accessibility issues regarding buildings and outdoor areas.
Thank you, Ana. We're going to now take a look at some of the things we observed while we were surveying. Many of the things we will be showing are typical of what we see in a lot of cities and towns, and include the kinds of things that Shrewsbury will be able to correct in order to improve accessibility. So this first screen, moving from the top row on the left and then moving across to the right, here's some issues we spotted at Town Hall. This isn't everything we saw, but these are indicative of the kinds of things that we saw. The first picture shows an accessible parking space, and it has proper signage, but there's a minimum height that's required for the signs. They have to be 60 inches above the ground, measured to the bottom of the sign, and in Massachusetts, no more than 96 inches above the ground. And these signs are a bit low. Having them at the correct height really helps with visibility, particularly when we start to have piles of snow and other things in parking lots. The middle picture in the top row is the selectmen's room. If audio communication is central to the use of the room, and we assume that at least at times amplified audio communication probably is, you should have an assistive listening system available, excuse me. And then once you have it available, it's important to be sure it's in operable working condition. For example, sometimes they involve receivers that need batteries, and we've certainly heard of situations where someone comes and wants access to the assistive listening system and no one has, checked the batteries in ages, and you find that things aren't working. And finally, once the system is available, you also need to have a sign of the international symbol for access to hearing loss, and that lets people know that they can ask for the assistive listening system. The top row on the far right, at the main entry and exit level, there was a lack of a tactile star. People who are low vision, particularly, look for that on the jamb of the elevator, and also on the button controls inside of the elevator. Now moving to the bottom row, bottom left, there's a nice illuminated exit sign at this exit door, but we would also want to have a tactile exit sign, which would be, if both of these doors are active leaves, would be on the right side, positioned on the right side. People who are low vision are taught to check that location, and it lets those folks know in an emergency that they're on an exit route rather than just, opening a door to a conference room or whatever the case may be. The photo of the toilet room, this has a few problems, I'm afraid. The grab bars were lower than the minimum height that's required. In Massachusetts, the dispensers, including the toilet paper dispenser, can't be positioned above the grab bar, and in this case, they are. And my guess is, looking at that photo, at least one of the two dispenser areas for the toilet paper is probably farther than allowed from the toilet. And though it's hard to see because the seat is up, the flush control is not on what we call the open or transfer side, which makes it hard for someone in a wheelchair to reach it, and it shouldn't be that way. If you're interested, if we haven't sent it already, the U.S. Access Board has some excellent animations that show some of the issues that I'm describing here, and issues about maneuvering clearance at doors, and all kinds of things that we'll be talking about. And if it's not part of your daily life, the animations can really help one to understand why the ADA standards and 521 CMR have regulations to correct these things. The final picture in the bottom right on this slide shows a service counter, but it lacks an accessible portion that is no more than 36 inches above the ground. And that's important for wheelchair users or people who are short in stature. Now at the senior center, I'm going to try to pick up the speed a bit here so I don't put you all to sleep, I guess. The top left, the flares, which are the parts on the side of this curb ramp, are steeper than they should be. There are regulations about cross and running slopes and that kind of thing. And these were a bit out of compliance. The door in the center, at the top row, we can see there's a little silver box at the top of the door, which is a closer, and it also has a latch, so that the door automatically closes and then latches shut. That means that if this is the push side of the door, there's some requirements for maneuver clearance, where a person in a wheeled mobility device or using a walker could position themselves to open the door, and there's stored items in the way here, and it also looks like there may be some items hanging off the wall that are what we would call a protruding object that someone who's using a cane, for example, low vision using a cane, wouldn't be able to detect and could run into. On the top right, just the path through this area in the senior center, there's lack of a 36-inch route that can be easily rectified by just slightly repositioning the furniture. And I should say a number of the things we're going to be mentioning tonight are things that can just be corrected with labor, moving some things. Not every accessibility issue is something that requires great expense to correct. Going to the bottom row on the left, it's nice that picnic tables are provided here, but we would want in this area to have at least one accessible picnic table. There are picnic tables that are very similar to this design that we're looking at that would have essentially just have one of the benches removed, and they have sufficient knee clearance so that someone in a wheelchair could join their friends at the picnic table. In the center row, bottom, it's a bit hard to see, but under the sink, there are pipes, where the water drains from the sink, and those aren't wrapped to prevent contact. It's an inexpensive fix, but something that you want to do because some people who are wheelchair users have no feelings in their legs, and those pipes can get very hot, and if they're not wrapped, they can end up burning their legs and not being aware that they're even doing it. And then the final image, there are lots of nice things about this toilet room, but on the side of what we call the open side of the toilet, where that table and the flowers are, that's where an individual with a wheelchair would have to position themselves to transfer onto the toilet so they can use it. And so it's important not to store things in that area because an otherwise accessible toilet room becomes unusable. At the library, again, starting top left and moving to the right, This is the same issue we saw before. The identification signs are lower than they should be. It's a pretty easy fix. The center picture, if there's an inaccessible entrance, it's very helpful to have a directional sign letting someone know, particularly say a wheelchair or walker user, where the nearest accessible entrance is. And I would add that if this were a situation where perhaps you had to go down a long walkway before you could really see this door, positioning the directional sign at the start of the walkway can be really helpful for people so that they don't have to backtrack to try to figure out, where they can enter the building. Top right, this is a completely accessible egress, and it has an illuminated exit sign, which is excellent. But in Massachusetts, when you have an accessible egress like this, they also want to have the illuminated international symbol of accessibility, which is the wheelchair symbol that I'm sure you're all familiar with. That allows people who need an accessible entrance the ability to see, honestly, at a pretty good distance. Let's say there's smoke or some other crisis. They can see at a pretty good distance that particular exit will allow them to completely get out of the building rather than, for example, getting to an exit door and confronting a staircase. And so when that illuminated sign is repaired or replaced, at that point, you should add an illuminated international symbol of accessibility. The bottom left, bottom row left image, these work surfaces have less than 27 inches knee and toe clearance. Not every work surface has to be accessible, but you would want 5% and at least one of each type to be accessible. So in this area, having one table, and people can sometimes just put something under the existing table to raise it a little bit, but having a table that has knee and toe clearance means people who need it can work in the same area as everyone else. Bottom center, this urinal is recessed more than 24 inches. A lot of ADA requirements are related to specific measurements, and it's less than 36 inches wide there. So someone who would need to get to it, who perhaps might be in a wheelchair and use a colostomy bag or something along those lines, they don't have the clear floor space that they need to use that urinal. And then the final photo in the bottom right, the paper towel dispenser that you see on the wall, it protrudes from the wall more than 4 inches, and it's higher than 27 inches and less than 80 inches. And the reason that's important is if someone was coming along with a cane, as I mentioned earlier, with some of those brochures in a wicker basket, they could run right into it. This can be pretty easily resolved by permanently putting a trash container, for example, under the paper towel dispenser. That would be found by a cane user, and they wouldn't, accidentally run into the paper towel dispenser and hurt themselves. Now moving to some exterior issues, and I guess these were outside some of the public schools. This walkway has what we call the cross slope. So the slope or tilt that's in the direction that you see the level positioned, that's greater than 2%. That might seem minimal, and some amount of cross slope is often engineered into walkways so that water will run off and you have less ice and that kind of thing. But when cross slope gets excessive, you'll see that people who use walkers and some others have real difficulty while walking, and that should be corrected. In the center picture in the top row, there's an otherwise proper accessible parking space. As I'm sure most, if not all of you know, a van accessible space needs to be bigger than a car space because you need room for the ramp to deploy from the van. But in this case, the sign is missing the designation van accessible. And again, when we get things like snow and leaves on the ground, it's very helpful for visitors to have the proper designation on the sign. On top right, just great to see electric vehicle charging stations. From what I understand, it's something we should be moving towards if we can. But these charging stations, they aren't on an accessible route. You have to get over that curb and, you know, walk through the shrubbery and so on to be able to get to the controls to attach the chargers to your car, and it shouldn't be that way. Bottom left, there are portable toilets that are considered accessible, and they're a larger size. For Massachusetts, the portable toilets have to be a little bigger than the standard. You have to have 72 inches width, if I'm remembering correctly, inside the toilet. They do make those, and I know most cities and towns rent these. They should be able to rent compliant portable toilets, and where you have portable toilets, you want at least one to be accessible, and to have it on an accessible route. I can also see, by looking at that photo, very up high in the center of the wall is what might be the toilet paper dispenser, and that's going to be awfully hard to use for someone who's a wheelchair user. It's above the grab bar and far out of reach range. The bottom center photo, we see what's called engineered wood fiber at the playground. The ADA allows the use of engineered wood fiber, but the state access code, 521 CMR, the regulations of the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, does not allow the use of engineered wood fiber for a variety of reasons. And so in this case, we don't have an accessible route to the playground and the play elements. And it's the same issue in the bottom right. You see a little bit of what's called poured in place rubber, the blue color on the right, but there isn't enough of it here such that there's a compliant, impact attenuating accessible route to at least one of each type of play element. I imagine we also called out that picnic table as not being accessible unless there was another accessible picnic table in the area. So again, according to the Massachusetts State Code, that engineered wood fiber is an issue, and you can see part of why on the poured in place rubber. It tends to pile up and dissipate from certain areas and then get on top of the rubber and make it less firm and stable. So it requires such extensive maintenance that Massachusetts has decided it's not an allowable playground surface. Okay, public school interior, the top left, there's a sign. I think it's probably a toilet room. It probably says men. I can't quite see it. Looking at it in this photo, I think it's too high. It doesn't have raised characters in Braille, and it's not on the latch side of the door. People who are low vision are taught to find the latch side of the door and reach where you see the cinder block tiles just to the right of the lock, sort of at that area, and then can identify, what type of room they're entering, a classroom, a toilet room. And so that signage needs to be replaced. The photo in the top in the center, we have a sink that doesn't have knee and toe clearance. So like a wheelchair user can't use it. A problem that will probably come up later in the slides is when we have a proper sink, people often store things under it, which makes a usable sink unusable. The top right, it's the same issue with the work surfaces I mentioned before. There's no knee or toe clearance there. You can see that lower shelf. You would want at least one of those to be accessible. The gym at the bottom left, when those bleachers are replaced, if they ever are, it was our estimate that this isn't the kind of bleacher that incorporates space for wheelchair users. When they're replaced, you would want to get that kind of bleacher so that a wheelchair user can sit typically in the front row of the bleachers next to a companion and, enjoy watching their son or child, or be the coach, whatever, enjoy the event just like everybody else. Bottom center, we're on the pull side of a door, meaning that to get out of this door, you would pull it towards you. And we don't have 18 inches minimum maneuvering clearance just to the right of the door. And again, if we send those US Access Board animations to you, they'll make this very clear. Because of that table and stored supplies, if you imagine yourself in a wheelchair, you need that space so you can pull the door towards you and not just have it hit the feet on your wheelchair. So that makes this, for now, a non-accessible entrance. Of course, to fix it, all that's really required is to relocate that small table. And then this is a science lab at the bottom right. You can see with the wood under the dark surface, it drops down quite a bit. None of these tables have that 27 inches minimum knee and toe clearance. And we would want 5%, at least one of the tables, to have that. The same would go with sinks in a lab. You need to have an accessible sink. And there, if you're really looking at your labs, we have a lot of information about things that can be made accessible, so that people like some folks we know who are wheelchair users, but also medical doctors and scientists, can have the same access in a science lab as everybody else. So some quick things about toilet rooms. The top left, these hand dryers are protruding objects, as I described before. They stick out too much. We need to either put something under them or relocate them out of the circulation path. This baby changing table doesn't have the 27 inches knee and toe clearance, so it really wasn't installed properly. The urinals at the top right, there needs to be one lower urinal, and in fact in Massachusetts, even if you have just one, it has to be lower than either of these, which is what is needed for many wheelchair users when they use a urinal. Bottom left, there are a number of toilet compartments, but there wasn't an accessible compartment. Looking at this photo, I assume the issue is that there wasn't sufficient clear space inside the compartment, for at least one compartment for a wheelchair user, and it would also need, things like grab bars and so on and so forth. The bottom center image, you can see there's lack of a rear grab bar, and the toilet paper dispenser again is above the grab bar, and we don't want that. The bottom right, you can see we call sinks and toilet rooms lavatories in the ADA. There's a requirement about the maximum height of the bottom of the reflective surface of the mirror. These are too high, and you would want at least one of them lowered, and you would want it to be at the sink that has the wrapped pipes, so that someone in a wheelchair can use the mirror. Another way to get around this is there's also a different design of a mirror that slightly tilts down towards the floor, and that can solve the problem of the mirror being too high if that other type of mirror is installed properly. Public school locker rooms, top left, we see a transfer shower that lacks the kind of seat that you see on the top right. There should be a seat there that a wheelchair user would transfer onto. And it's also important when that seat's installed that you don't put it under a grab bar. It has to be on the clear wall. And in the next top right, there's lack of the required clear floor space just outside of the shower to transfer onto the seat. The changing room in the bottom left, there's lack of clear floor space to transfer onto that bench. And then the bottom right, there's some specific requirements about benches in locker rooms. At least one of the benches has to be, I think, 24 inches deep, and it has to have back support. And that's not the case here. It's, again, a pretty easy thing to remedy. The entire bench doesn't have to be accessible, but a certain portion of it does.
David,
Yes.
I appreciate you going through all these things, but we got a lot to do in this meeting, and if you could
Okay.
pick it up a little bit, I mean.
Sure, absolutely. So honestly, you can read these. Here at the outdoor facilities, the main issue is a route, an accessible route that's firm, stable, and slip resistant to the boundary of sport activity, or to the picnic table, or to the basketball court, or to the seating area. So a summary, and then a summary of typical signage issues. Again, a lack of directional signage at entrances, letting people know where the nearest accessible entrance is. The lack of tactile egress signage, we've already talked about that. Lack of tactile egress signage on the latch side of the door. letting people know if they're at an inaccessible egress where the nearest accessible egress is. Honestly, everything here I think we've talked about a little bit. Some best practice ideas, some things that aren't required but really help with accessibility. Having a stable, firm, and slip-resistant surface next to a bench, so a wheelchair user can sit there with their shoulders aligned with a friend on the bench. Podiums have been designed that can adjust height and have knee and toe clearance. Those are really helpful for some people who might want to make a presentation. We're seeing the electric vehicle stations on the bottom left. In addition to the problem of the charging station not being on an accessible route, it's best to design these spaces where they have an access aisle, the striped aisle that you'll see in an accessible space, so that a wheelchair user can use that space to get in and out of their car. And then the staircase here, a recommendation we make on almost all stairs, and you do have this in some cases in Shrewsbury, is to have contrasting colors at the end of the nosings. It really helps people who have depth perception issues in safely navigating stairs. Just quickly, we always like to point out when we see some really nice things. Here's an outstanding top left design of a picnic table where you can see there's an accessible portion where someone in a wheelchair could join their friends. Top right, here you see a fully rubber, impact attenuating, accessible, firm, stable, slip resistant, accessible surface throughout a playground. Really excellent. And that's ideally the kind of thing we like to see instead of engineered wood fiber. Some more accessible picnic benches in the bottom. And then here in the bottom right is the example of the firm surface next to a bench. And it's also big enough that the wheelchair user, their wheels could be slightly behind the bench so that their shoulders could be aligned with someone sitting there, and that's really outstanding. Some more good examples, this bar under the stairs will help a cane user not to smash their head basically on those stairs, which are a protruding object. Here's the contrasting colored strips that we like, and this picture in the center and on the right. We typically want to have handrails extend 12 inches beyond the bottom stair or top stair, but they could become protruding objects, so they're allowed to wrap around like this. And these are particularly helpful for low vision people to let them know that they've reached the last stair. And some more good examples, a lower counter on the left. Ideally, we want to move that trash can out of the way. Here we have drinking fountains that are recessed so they don't become protruding objects for cane users. Here's in the bottom left is an example of an accessible sink. And it's wonderful here to see that people haven't stored things under it, which often happens. And bottom right is a compliant sign with raised characters in Braille, the international symbol of accessibility on the latch side of the door, which would let a user who needs to know it that this is an accessible toilet room. I'm now going to let Kelsey talk a little bit about the GIS survey, and then Anna will wrap up and we'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
With the GIS survey, we completed around 22 total miles of sidewalks and walkways, and it included areas such as the town hall, the public library, the high school, and also some residential areas around them. The image from Google Maps, it shows the red lines, which indicate the streets that we surveyed, walkways, curb ramps, and other street-related elements. And the building icons that appear on the map, we passed them, but they weren't included in the survey. Next slide. So this is the dashboard that was one of the final deliverables that we generated from our completed survey. It breaks down the issues into 4 major categories of pedestrian access routes, curb ramps and blended transitions, pedestrian signals and controls, and then also transit stops and shelters. And the dashboard's also interactive, so you can click on the pie chart and view the issues by each set of category. And you can also click on each point on the map as well to see the issue at that location and the remediation. And then these were some of the issues that we found, and you can see when clicking through the data on the map. There were multiple instances of excessive cross slopes in the walkways, but also some of the curb cuts as well. And then we also found vegetation would protrude into the walkways of curb cuts, but also it also blocked the controls of some of the pedestrian signals. And then some instances where the transition from the curb cut to the street, it wasn't flush.
Okay.
And then Anna, do you want to just finish up?
Oh, yes. Just very quickly, is about the self-evaluation and transition plan. We submitted a self-evaluation report that includes the evaluation of the policies and procedures, and also the evaluation of all the facilities that we surveyed. And together, we provided also a transition plan database, which is an Excel file that is meant to be a living document that the town can sort or modify or update, both for track progress and to modify priorities based on the town needs and budget. And finally, the goals of the transition plan and the self-evaluation and the transition plan is to make sure that all the town's programs, services, and activities, when viewed in their entirety, are readily accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. Make sure that priority of ensuring program access with a goal of equal participation of people with disabilities, and implementation strategy integrated into town's planning and budgeting. And finally, make sure that all residents, regardless of ability, feel that they know about and can participate in all that the town of Shrewsbury has to offer. That's it. Sorry was so long. It's a very long presentation, but we are available for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baldinger, you have the complete report, right?
Yes.
So what's the strategy going forward?
So some of the no-cost issues, such as moving furniture, some of the things that they called out are already in play to be fixed. We've also applied for a MVP grant for about $140,000 to do improvements, some larger improvements. Some of them are related to exterior access in a couple of the schools, and then some ADA paths that we need in some of our parks. And so hopefully we'll learn about that funding in January, so we can start with those processes next year.
Okay, so it's just something you're gonna integrate into the capital plan?
Absolutely,
into the-
and a lot of the stuff has been called out, you know, like I said, it is no cost, we can just, you know, some of it's just furniture moving, they have items in places near doors or under sinks that we're working on with the school department to solve. And then there's some signage issues, we have to upgrade a lot of signage, so we'll just, over time, we'll go through the list and hopefully
Okay,
get through it.
so it's worth doing the study.
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, we definitely found, you know, that there were items in here that, you know, you wouldn't think to notice, and they called out a lot of good stuff for us.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments?
I have a question in regards to signage, especially with safe, accessible egress. Do we have a cost estimate of what that would be if we were just to address that issue right now, where that's like a life safety issue?
I couldn't give you an accurate number right now.
Okay.
For sure, but I mean, I would say, for the most part, we are in pretty good shape. Some of our older buildings is where we have the most need, probably, for signage.
Okay, thank you.
Is that?
Yeah, I just, you know, I think, you know, where there's life safety issues, especially with, you know, safe egress and things, those are things we should definitely make sure are addressed immediately, if possible, where possible.
Okay. Questions, comments?
Yes, I was just going to ask, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of opportunity here. And we heard a long list, and the report includes
Sure.
even more. So in terms of, you know, Michelle's point, anything that is completely egregious or that really puts us at risk that we need to fix more immediately? And are you going to sort of prioritize these in terms of that
Yes.
level of?
Yes, so we've kind of gone through that process so far, and picked out some items, and they are directly related to egress. We have some issues at Spring and Patton on the portables. The the wooden stairs that exit those, you know, we're working on replacing all of those, because those were called out. And some handrails here and there on some of the buildings we're working on. And then some, the other part of the grant funding we're looking at is some clear ADA issues in some of our parks for people. But life safety wise, there's not much, I would say.
That's good, thank you.
Okay. Ms.
Would
Castro?
it be possible to just get a rough list of the kinds of things that are being addressed?
Sure.
So we have, because I know it's like to put you on the spot and ask you exactly what you're doing, but, I mean, I would be interested in just seeing an outline of what it is that you're tackling first.
Sure, I can put that together, yep.
No hurry, thank
Thank
you.
Mr. Miska, anything to, closing comments on this, or?
No, I mean, we obviously appreciate the partnership that was made possible through a state grant, and we're exploring all those opportunities to match our local funds to make these improvements. And I just like the way that the team put the report together. It is actionable, and we can update it, and we do look forward to going through and checking off the boxes and addressing the things that you've set forth for us. It's important that we took on this initiative, and we look forward to moving forward with it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Samia?
We get a report in maybe 6 months, even if it's a brief.
Sure.
Just an update.
Okay.
Could I just ask one
Sure.
additional question? In regards to, you know, we saw some examples in the slideshow with, you know, just furniture items that were placed too close to accessible doorways and things like that. Is there an initiative or an effort at any point to sort of educate, especially, you know, if it's within schools, if that we're seeing most of these issues, to make sure that, you know, staff in schools are aware that, you know, when a doorway is accessible, you can't, you know, place a table there and, you know,
Oh,
just simple things like
Making sure
that.
the corridors are clean?
Yeah,
Are
like
the
not,
entrances?
not just to move the furniture, but to ensure that staff is aware that those need to remain open and accessible.
So we do that, the school department and public buildings and the building inspector and the fire department have collaborated for many years. In August, we have our building walkthroughs, and a lot of those issues are called out. And we meet with principals and go through that stuff.
Okay.
And so there is some education there,
Okay.
for sure. The policing part of it, I'm not sure that I can help you with that one, but,
Yeah.
I mean, there is education to that effect.
Okay, yeah, just making sure that
Any
information
place
is
that looks
filtered
like there's room
down.
for somebody, think they can store stuff, they do it. It's
Yeah,
a battle. But it needs to be, it does need to be done.
yeah, I appreciate
Used to
the,
deal with that
the
all the
storage
time at work.
struggles, but, yeah, just making sure that information is filtered down to sort of like the end user and, you know, making sure that everyone's
Yeah,
aware.
it's a constant battle.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else from you folks?
The last thing I would say is to just be sure as you change and improve things, let people know, you know, take some credit. Once things are improved, then people, once they hear about it, elements will be more accessible and more usable. And if you've gone to all this trouble, you know, you might as well let folks know that you've improved the accessibility of the programs and services that you have.
Yeah, true. Most important thing, though, is to get it done, is people need it. Okay, well, thank you for the presentation, thank you for the work. Give us something to do for a while, right, Keith? Like you don't have enough.
And the other thing, I think, thank Justin Dobson, since he's here tonight. He was integral part of this whole process, working with IHCD and coordinating and all that stuff, too, so.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're on to number 6. We're going backwards.
Already?
What?
Already?
Already, yeah. Okay. Mr. Mizikar.
All right. Agenda item 6 is to review and consider the revision of the town's financial policies and objectives. This is an annual endeavor that the board reviews the financial policies and the objectives for the upcoming fiscal year, and they really lay out distinctly from each other. Financial policies were established in 2018 and have been really stable since that point in time. And they are intended to be a stabilizing force, and they deal with things like our reserve fund levels, our general stabilization fund account balances, and our debt service approach. Contrarily, the financial objectives are more of an annual document based on current conditions and near-term goals and priorities of the select board, and have changed each and every year since we first implemented them several years ago. So it's my recommendation to the board that we make no adjustments to the financial policies and allow them to remain as they are, continue with the goals of achieving 5% in the general stabilization fund, which is something that we've been working towards and making good progress, among other things. However, the financial objectives, we've made a series of recommendations given the current financial conditions, and I can provide a brief summary of that. First, within the document, we've adjusted the priority levels of bringing the alignment of the budget to the 2030 strategic plan to be the first objective for the fiscal year. We've recognized the work and accomplishments that have been made over the previous few years as far as moving in this direction. And then we've revised approaches with regards to the retirement system and other post-employment benefits by updating the funds that we've contributed and the position that we found ourselves in from the last actuarial analysis of both plans. With regards to the pension, we're at 105% funding, which is where we want to be. That was as of January 1st, and obviously market conditions and investments have suffered over the course of the last 12 months, which will impact our position. But I don't see a drastic change needed for the upcoming budget cycle as we have policies in place with regards to the management of those funds. And then OPEB, we are currently studying our latest conditions, and we'll be providing a report sometime later in this fiscal year. With regards to commitments made to the residents associated with the May 2021 operational override, we've updated those priorities and contributions and remain committed to that. And then we finally provided updates with regards to the use of American Rescue Plan Act funding, and it's very minor but planned for use of those funds, which is grounded in the override framework between the school committee and the select board. So nothing extremely drastic. It's all based upon current financial conditions and moving more strategically forward for the fiscal year. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Questions, comments? I think it makes sense. Okay, do you need us to vote to?
For the, yes, maintaining the financial policies as presented and the adjustments to the financial objectives for fiscal year '24.
A motion?
I make a motion that we accept the financial policies and then objectives as drafted for FY '24.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay. Now we're down to 9, right? Now we're really moving.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Do we have to say anything about 5? Because we never did 5 at all.
Oh, so, well, sure. We have item, public comment, but nobody requested public comment, so we don't have it this evening. Item 9 is to review and act on the 2023 license renewals to include the following: alcohol, common victular, entertainment, Sunday and weekend, bowling alleys, billiard tables, automatic amusements, auto dealers, livery auction, Lord's Day, and donation bins. As per the list that was provided to us in the drive, they're all ready to go. They've paid, all their paperwork is in, so Something like a motion to,
I just want to note that there will be another list.
right,
at
there were about,
the Meeting on the 20th. There
Right,
were
there's-
just some inspection certificates we were waiting on.
yeah, it's about 12
Yeah,
more
or
coming.
so.
So these are only the licensees that are presented to us tonight. There'll be another 12 or so on our next meeting.
And I believe there were two, there's a memo in the drive that there are two that are not renewing
Right.
at all.
Right. But they're not on the list, so we're not gonna renew them. Right. Okay.
I had a question when I reviewed this list on, most of these licenses are pretty, straightforward, but I had a question, that I just thought might be important for anybody that might be watching on what the Lord's Day, is. And so, Mr. Mizikar, explained it to me earlier. I don't know if you'd like to.
Sure.
It is Bolero, by the way. There
Yeah.
were the two that we had talked about.
There's two provisions within the Massachusetts general laws that were adopted the first part of the 20th century, so the first 50 years, 1900 to 1950, which refer to certain activities that are permissible on the Lord's Day or Sunday. For the town, it still requires that there's special license granted for bowling on Sundays. The other one is selling of ice cream.
Yeah.
So maybe not the biggest controversial issues these days, but still, according to the general laws as they sit today, it's still required to issue these licenses.
It's part of the old blue laws, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, thank you. I just was curious when I saw that. It's not something you typically see these days, so,
There were a whole bunch of those. There's a lot of them went away, but
yeah. So, thank you for explaining that again.
imagine you could get fined for having ice cream on Sunday.
I'd be in a lot of trouble.
Okay, so did someone make a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 10 is to review and act to designate the following positions as special municipal employees pursuant to Mass General Law 268A, special education paraprofessional and program monitor. This was requested by Parks and Rec for an employee they'd like to have work with them. And it needs to be done because the employee is also the employee of the school department. And I guess that this employee would also be working during the summer with Parks, in the Parks program. So
Okay.
allows a person to work with them during the off-school season.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 11 is to review and act to establish the funding plan for the American Rescue Plan funds. Mr. Mizikar, would you like to take us through that?
Sure. So we have a couple slides this evening to work through based upon the board's development of a comprehensive funding plan for the remaining American Rescue Plan Act dollars. The process that the board has taken at two separate times since the issuance of these funds in the spring of 2021 included seeking feedback from staff and then determining priorities. So the American Rescue Plan Act, of course, was a piece of federal legislation that brought $1.9 trillion of emergency aid to local governments and state governments across the country. Shrewsbury's total allocation was $11,515,685. It's permissible to be spent through the direction of the Select Board under the rules established by the United States Treasury Department. ARPA funds can cover eligible expenses from March of 21 when the legislation passed through December 31st of 2024. There is a secondary option where if funds are committed prior to December of 2024, they can be expended for additional 2 years. But we have targeted a plan more conservatively, and because of the current needs, to indeed spend all those funds prior to the end of 2024 to the greatest extent possible. So the board initially set funds aside into a spending plan in October of 2021. This was under a set of preliminary rules from the U.S. Treasury that were much more complex and much more limiting than the final rules, which were established later on. The board set aside funds in two categories, including revenue loss. At that time, the town was only allowed to expend approximately $650,000 under revenue loss, and I'll talk about how that's different now in just a minute. So the board's initial priorities for this limited funds to what we actually had on hand at the time, which was half of the total allocation. From that initial set aside that we'll go through here in a second, we've expended nearly $2 million of those funds as of this date. So within that initial plan, the board met its commitments to, it was set forth in the override guidance documents, initially offering residents nearly $500,000 in tax relief that would have otherwise been required in the fiscal year 2022 budget. Commitments were also made for water and sewer improvements, mainly the water main within Clinton Street. In different times, as far as the pandemic goes, a large commitment to the response to public health and how it was impacting Shrewsbury residents, both from a physical health and a mental health standpoint, and then also addressing the immediate challenges of the pandemic and the town's fiscal recovery and businesses' fiscal recovery by setting aside $500,000 to various economic initiatives associated and related to the pandemic. So of that initial $5.7 million that the town received, the board set aside 3.5 of it. Again, we've spent just about $2 million of those funds and continue. Some of those were long-term plans with investments in places like Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, and other longer-term initiatives like enhanced public health funding and reporting capabilities. Although we haven't expended all the funds, we're on track and spending them as planned. So that left a little less than $8 million remaining after the board's initial allocation, which brings us to phase 2 of the plan. So there has been significant rule changes from that and the establishment of the initial plan that were put into place that allows for much more greater flexibility in how we can use the Rescue Plan Act funds. So I noted that under the original rules, the town was allowed to spend up to $650,000 for revenue loss. And in a practical standpoint, what that means is those funds could be allocated really to most anything the town is legally allowed to do as a municipality here within the Commonwealth. So there were some limitations, like you couldn't contribute to pension shortfalls and debt service matters and things like that. But broadly, you could only use the $650,000 for that broadest category. The final rules allowed each and every municipality, regardless of how much money they received, even if it was less than $10 million, and regardless of their size, to spend in the broadest category of revenue loss up to $10 million. So that really just kind of unlocked all these funds for a different mindset of thinking. So I have to commend the board for kind of the purposeful approach that you took and not over allocating the funds right out of the gate. There's been a lot of criticism for municipalities not moving faster than we have, but being diligent in your approach has led to greater opportunities at this time than we otherwise would have had if we kind of panicked under the first set of rules. So the board called upon the departments during the final months of the summer, emphasized that project submissions would be prioritized based upon how they provide direct benefits to residents and to the greatest number of residents as possible, and that's led us to the development of the Phase 2 plan, which the board is recommending this evening. So I'll just walk through category by category and talk about some of the sub-projects. And then we'll talk about the next steps where we're seeking public engagement in a forum that's coming up one week from this evening at the Senior Center, which Chair DiPaolo talked about at the beginning of this meeting. But with regards to the first category, there's a proposal to set aside $1.5 million to make improvements to the public sewer system. These dollars are offsetting and matching both state MassWorks grants that we received, private investment, and some sewer rate direct investments. So it really offsetting what would otherwise be required to be raised entirely through the sewer rate. So this is providing benefits to ratepayers. It will be for investments primarily in the Walnut Street pump station and Walnut Street sewer mains, as there's deficiencies, and those deficiencies are leading to challenges for further economic development within the Route 20 and adjacent corridor. Moving on, the board has set aside probably one of the most unique opportunities with these funds to directly benefit residents by providing income qualified assistance for utility bills. This is obviously critical in the time of drastically inflating and rising utility costs, whether that's for home heating oil or other types of heating, including electricity and natural gas. So this will supplement other programs that are already in place to provide these types of assistance over the coming months. And not only is there utility assistance, but there's also a program conceived in partnership with Selco to make more permanent, assist residents in making more permanent investments in their home by replacing inefficient systems. So we're working out the plans and the details, whether on how we will work with Selco, but I'm excited about that. So it's not only helping residents lower costs in the near term, but also making meaningful investments that will benefit them in the long term, regardless of the cost of fuel. Quality of life initiatives obviously is the largest category that we've set forth here, and I'll talk generally about those types of investments. They're primarily focused within parks and recreation and land use matters for the community, and the board is proposing to set aside of $4.3 million. Those include significant investments in Lake Street Park, significant investments in Edgemere Park, Maple Avenue athletic fields, and a $1.5 million set aside for strategic land acquisitions for preservation and maintenance of open space. Now, there's no land specifically targeted, as of this evening, but it's a strategic move for the board to be flexible as properties come on the market. And we seek opportunities as we're seeing rising interest in all types of development in the community, and is there a role for the board to play in maintaining and preserving open space. With regards to the next category, which is engagement and communications, this is a primary, this is the primary point of feedback that we receive during the strategic plan development. It's the number one strategic outcome area that has been set forth in the strategic plan, which is finding ways to better engage and connect with residents and assisting residents in finding more ways to engage and connect with each other. So there's contributions to support public programs, events and activities, community-based activities. There's communications initiatives by town staff. There's dedicated and gradually declining grant-like funding for dedicated communications position within the town. So this is a really unique opportunity to accelerate some of those priorities that residents set forth for us through the strategic planning process. The next to last category is staff recruitment, development, and performance. This is an area that's the most internally focused and provides a significant amount of funding to support staff development, including training, type programs. It offers support to enhance our ability to recruit from a larger swath and provide support to getting candidates to the community for interviews and while they're here and managing the interview process. And there is a set aside that would provide for staff incentives as we work through and into a more performance-based system. I'll say in total, since this is one of the most internal areas and it in many ways furthers the overarching goal of providing more enhanced services to residents. It's just a small fraction of not only total ARPA dollars that we're offering, but also the total cost of employees. Like Mr. Collins said earlier, staffing costs on the municipal side is our largest cost area, and excluding utilities, total salaries is about $19 million. So this is just a fraction of that in ways to incentivize and ensure we have the highest performing staff. And then finally, public safety initiatives. There's a couple, one key area, and that is really providing an opportunity to increase firefighting staff if we're unsuccessful in this round of the SAFER grant. So this would be granting ourselves dollars to provide the same output and outcome of additional firefighters. And it also addresses a myriad of other public safety initiatives, both physical, communication, and very resident-facing things like speed signs within neighborhoods, and those types of things that will preserve and allow for the public good and public safety. So this is a plan that sets forth the use of almost $7.6 million. It leaves roughly $400,000 remaining and unallocated. And we certainly look forward to further conversation this evening with the board and then engagement with the residents on December 13th, where we will, as the chair said earlier, we'll provide an overview presentation, but then we're going to set up more charrette-like mini stations where town staff will be there to really provide details on all the programs. We'll have visual aids identifying funding in particular project and program areas, not just at these broad buckets. And we look forward to resident feedback. What did we miss? What do you like? How does it align with the plan? And how will we move forward? So the board is looking to recommend this plan for use at the forum and beyond, and happy to answer any questions at this point.
I just want to add, some of these monies will be spent over several years. We have, what, 3 years to spend this money?
Yep, so we have, 2 full years at this point. We are targeting the use of all these funds by December 31st, 2024.
2024?
Yep.
Okay. So, questions, comments? No?
I have one, just a comment. So,
Yeah, sure.
I'm really confident in this plan, that it's well thought out, that it's rooted in what we've heard from the community and residents during the strategic planning process. I think that there's something here for everyone. I think we've covered infrastructure to benefit all, recreation opportunities, public safety improvements, strengthening our safety net for residents facing food insecurity and challenges with their utility bills. I'm really proud of the work that was done by this board, but also, by staff and departments that really thought about the best ways to utilize this one-time funding that provides us with a really unique opportunity to do things that we otherwise aren't able to get to. And by doing these things and using the ARPA funding to take care of some of these projects, it frees up space and capacity in our regular operating budget to continue to chip away at the kinds of program improvements and park improvements and capital investments that we aren't able to get to. And I think, and you probably said it, and maybe I missed it, our goal here was to make sure we weren't putting these funds towards recurring expenses. Like, there's supposed to be non-recurring costs, and we were really careful to make sure that we weren't going to be building up something that we couldn't maintain over the long term, because these funds are a one-time opportunity. So I'm really excited for this forum. I hope that many people are able to come out. And for those people that aren't able to come out, are we taking any sort of feedback through email?
We can do that, yeah. We can, you know, everything could come into the select board's email distribution group, and we can reinforce that opportunity through social media and other things between now and the forum.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And then will the presentation that's provided that evening be posted online for people to review?
Yes.
Is SMC going to be there, or is it going to be recorded, do you know?
We weren't planning on doing that, just because of how we established the meeting. We think the presentation will be rather brief and the engagement will be at a higher level. Taylor, of course, as she always does, has worked on really good visual aids and documents and poster like materials for that meeting that we can reinforce through the website and provide residents the opportunity to comment there.
Excellent, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Samuel?
Yeah, just a quick comment. So that Mr. Mizikar mentioned this earlier, but the usage of ARPA is consistent with the override statement that the Board of Selectmen and School Committee had made back in March of '21. Just one confirmation point. So one of the commitments was to prohibit or extremely limit the use of this aid for recurring expenditures, which we're doing here. Just want to confirm that any potential utilization for even a small amount of recurring expenses is built in our forecast, that we could absorb that, and that won't change what was discussed and presented earlier with the school department. So it wouldn't change anything, right?
It's not gonna change anything,
Okay.
right? Yep.
And then the other piece is that this is consistent with really being able to extend out the override as well. These are expenses that we'd otherwise have, consistent with feedback from our residents, and these are things that would need to be done. We have pushed them out in some instances for decades.
That's correct.
And others are really quality of life that the pandemic has really shaped in terms of desires and desired outcomes from our residents based on significant feedback opportunities. So it's consistent with what we said, as well as guiding principles and everything else that Mrs. Cassavant had said as well, and has been presented throughout the course of today's meeting, that it's all linked together and it fits well together with the financial objectives, the priorities, and the 2030 strategic plan. So it's all linked together and it's taken shape nicely, and appreciate the thoughtful work that you and the staff have done to really help shape the areas of need that we wouldn't have that clarity on, given our roles. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
I think this, well, it was a unique opportunity, to say the least, because we never had this kind of money to do anything with, but I think this was the most collaborative process of putting projects together between the departments, other boards, this board, the manager's office, of any that I've been involved with in my whole time as selectman. Really came together, and really, I think there was, everybody didn't get what they wanted, obviously, because there's a million things we could do with it, but I thought we really built a strong consensus around what we all thought should be done. I thought it was a really good process, so I'm happy with what we came up with. And there is, like somebody said, there was something in here for everybody. So be interesting to see the response we get on the 13th. But anyways.
Before I make the motion, just to be clear, we're making a motion so that this plan can be presented. We're not making a motion to expend these dollars in this way. That is contingent upon what we hear at the feedback session on the 13th. So this will come back to us.
Right, but this is our, how do we say it?
Our proposal.
Yeah.
What?
Proposed plan.
Yeah, this is the proposed plan.
Okay. Right, correct.
This is a proposed spending plan for the ARPA funds,
Correct.
yes.
All right. So I move that we approve, we approve to establish the American Rescue Act plan, funding plan.
Second.
Okay, motion second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, and now, the big one every year is to review and act on the matter of one free bag in the pay-as-you-throw program, one free bag after Christmas, the week after Christmas. And this year it'll be from December 26th to December 30th, right? Not the 31st. One free bag at the curb. Doesn't have to be blue, can be black, can be yellow, can be orange. It's one of the most popular programs that I've seen in town. And it will be on Monday, even though Monday is a legal holiday. Waste Management does not have it as a legal holiday. They have to work. So Monday morning, the 26th, you can have your bag out, you'll pick it up. So, have a motion to approve the one free bag the week
Yep,
from the
I
26th to
move
the 30th.
approval.
Second.
Second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, item 13 is to review and act to allow plowing and de-icing of specified private streets in the town of Shrewsbury. This is, we accepted the act, but we still have to vote every year to allow the town to plow and de-ice private streets. So we have a list of streets that we were provided, and we need to vote to allow the town to plow and de-ice the streets this winter season. So can I have a motion?
Yes, but before I make that motion, I'd just like to disclose that I live on a private street. So I move approval.
You move it? Yep. Second?
Yep,
Did
she
you say?
seconded.
Did you
She
say?
said second.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing well this evening. Okay, we have motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, so voted. Item 14 is to review and act on the winter maintenance of unaccepted subdivision streets to be plowed by developers pursuant to Select Board Policy 16. We enacted a policy back in 2005 that subdivision streets are to be plowed, unaccepted subdivision streets are to be plowed by the developer at their expense. And if they don't, the town will plow them and charge at a rate to be determined by the DPW department.
There's a memo provided with the calculated rate.
Right. And the developers know that. So, could I have a motion to act on,
Yeah, I move approval.
Second?
second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 15 is to review and act on the Select Board's meeting schedule from January to June 2023. Did everybody get a chance to look at that?
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, just in case you're romantic and you have to observe Valentine's Day, we do have a meeting on February 14th if we hold a schedule.
So you're gonna get us all chocolates?
Get everybody a little heart, little heart chocolate. Is everybody okay with this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so, could someone make a motion to accept
Motion
the
to
schedule?
approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 16 is to review and act to reappoint one member to the Shrewsbury Scholarship Committee for a term set to expire October 31st, 2025. We have James Pignataro wishing to be reappointed.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, you have motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 17 is to review and act to reappoint one member to the Westboro Treatment Plant Board for a term set to expire September 30th, 2025. Francis Holloway expressed interest in being reappointed.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. We have a request for executive session, but before we do that, let's jump down to correspondence. Item 19 is an email dated November 14th, 2022, from Deborah Wagner, Director of Accounts, Massachusetts Department of Revenue, approving our tax rate for 2023, so noted. Item 20 is an email dated November 16th from George Smith, 33 Clue Street, regarding Community Animal Hospital, regarding construction at 2:45 a.m. in the morning. So noted, that issue was addressed. Item 21 is a letter received November 17th, 2022, from Robert Perlman, Many Rivers LLC, about community outreach meeting, which was held on December 1st, so noted. Item 22 is an email dated November 18th from Deborah Vo, 47 Worthington Ave, regarding a problem with leaf collection. I believe that was addressed, so noted. Item 23 was an email dated November 19th from Christina Abdi, 157 Fisher Street, regarding missed leaf pickup on 157 Fisher Street. That also was addressed, so noted. Item 24 is an email dated November 20th from Adrian Reynolds, 37 Rosedale Avenue, regarding a official removal request of the Executive Director of the Shrewsbury Housing Authority, so noted. Item 25 was an email dated November 21st, 2022, from Kevin Krasinski, Transportation Project Manager, CMRPC, public meeting notice, so noted. Item 26 was an email dated November 23rd, 2022, from Lisa Bartoni, a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the Shrewsbury Development Corp., regarding not seeking reappointment to the ZBA and the SDC when her terms expire in 2023. She's been on for, I forgot to write how many years, but I think over 12 on both. We thank her for her service, but she's not finished yet. Her job just demands too much time, and she won't be able to put the time and effort into it, so we'll have to deal with that in 2023. Item 27 is an email dated November 29th, 2022, from Bridget Nikisher, Strategic Affairs Specialist, Vincente Cedarburg LLP, notice of community outreach meeting for Finest Trees LLC, for an outreach meeting on December 8th. It's a virtual meeting regarding a marijuana distribution facility on Route 20. Again, it'll be virtual. You can contact the proponent at david@vincentecedarburg.com. So noted. Item 28 is a memorandum dated November 30th from Rowan McAllister, Assistant Town Planner, regarding data regarding the existing and proposed housing stock. So noted. That's really interesting if anybody hasn't had a chance to read it yet, checking the history of the housing, going back to when, like the 60s, 70s?
I went the whole way back into the late 1800s.
Oh, that's right.
Technically, but, yep.
And see how the history of the housing stock being built in town. So noted. Item 29 is a memorandum dated December 1st, 2022, from Christopher McGolrick, Director of Planning and Economic Development, regarding school children and housing developments as of October 2022. That was started by Ms. Loss several years ago, tracking the student population in the various apartment complexes and several of the large subdivisions in town. Got a history of the of the populations as they trend up and down over the past several years. So noted. And items 30 through 41 are emails that were dated between November 27th and November 29th regarding either opposition to the driveway on South Street for the proposed Subaru dealership, or requesting right-in, right-out only on that driveway. And that's related to the ZBA hearing on that property. So noted. Okay, so I think that's all we have for open session. And then we'll go back to item 18, which is a request for an executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, or lease value of real property because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the board per Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, regarding 29 Hill Street, 104 Grove Street, 457, 439, and 443 Lake Street. So we have a motion to convene into executive session, not to reconvene at an open session at its conclusion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we need a formal motion though, right?
I can read the formal motion.
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board vote to enter into executive session pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, for the purposes listed on the agenda.
Okay. Second. Okay, this requires a roll call vote. Ms. Conlon?
Aye.
Mr. Samia? Aye. Ms. Cassavant?
Aye.
Ms. Flynn?
Aye.
Mr. Paul? Aye. Okay, we are going to adjourn into, convene into executive session, not to reconvene at open session at its conclusion. Good evening.